Hey everyone, so much information to dispense here with the powerful conjunction between the summer solstice and the solar eclipse in Cancer. And we'll be taking a look at this through the Uranian system of astrology, which is a system of resonance and frequency using the fourth harmonic, the 90-degree dial, and then through the Aries axis, this main artery here, we will get a very good idea of the inner and outer workings of the collective. Through these midpoint structures, these planetary symmetries, these planetary pictures, this is what's going to tell us about humanity and the state of mankind at any given moment. So it is the cardinal ingresses, or the beginning of the seasons, 0 degrees Libra, Aries, Cancer, and Capricorn, where the sun joins the Aries axis, that gives us a blueprint of possible events, global matters, and the state of consciousness within the hive for the coming months. Pretty much until we get a new chart, which is the fall equinox. However, all of these charts build on each other. And so with the cardinal ingresses and the Aries axis, what we are getting is information from the universe that is being received by humanity as part of its evolution. So these charts are really of tremendous value when it comes to our trajectory. So while our summer solstice is the cardinal ingress of 0 degrees Cancer, our solar eclipse within hours of the solstice is 22 minutes of the first degree of Cancer. And this conjunction, this double chart of the solstice and eclipse on the world axis, places tremendous emphasis on world matters, where the events of this period will have long-term ramifications all over the world. And so you can see as I toggle here back and forth between the two charts, the shift is so slight, and the planetary symmetries and midpoint structures are virtually the same. So I'll be interpreting this summer solstice, but consider the interpretation the same for the solar eclipse. Two more important points that I want to make before we delve in. The importance of this year as a whole cannot be overstated. If we look to the beginning of the solar cycle, that is the cycle, the winter solstice, the cycle between December 21st, 2019 and December 21st, 2020. That winter solstice gives us the overview of the whole year in terms of the social order as well as in terms of political events. And it's here that we find Pluto, Poseidon, and Capito on the main artery of the world axis, indicating not just an evolution of the collective soul, but with the Poseidon, a deep intellectual, spiritual, and ideological shift in the world. Also poignant to note is that we have begun this nation's Pluto return. That is, Pluto in Capricorn will be returning to its natal place in the nation's birth chart after almost 250 years. So between now and the end of 2023, our nation will begin to change in ways that are unimaginable, and these will be good changes. So for a great perspective, keep in mind that the last time Pluto was in this exact position was 1773 in the Revolutionary War. Pluto in Capricorn stirs up issues around power, autonomy, how much authority the government may or may not exercise. So this is a total transformation of the nation's identity. It's a restructuring of the nation's soul so that a new collective identity can emerge. Structures that have outlived their time are going to be replaced. So that means there'll be radical changes to business and economic systems, to political parties, to methods of government and governing, and many laws and legislations that lack integrity will go. And so it's really important to remember this, because while these changes are being implemented now, while this trajectory has just begun, especially with the financial and economic systems, that they are evolving alongside with the nation's Pluto return over the next 3.5 years. So the whole thing isn't just going to shift in the next 3 months, but it will be the start. You will start to see the beginnings of it. And really beyond the 3.5 years, because the implications are so big, not just for this country, but for the world. So I know I'm talking a lot about what happens here in the U.S., even though we're looking at the world axis, which is quantum. It's all of humanity. But we have to keep in mind the United States' own lunar nodal axis, and that is in Aquarius Leo. So we both play an international role, South Node in Aquarius, and we've always been leaders of the free world, North Node in Leo. And so this is why so much of what happens in the world depends on what happens here in the U.S. So right off, we have this Venus-Jupiter-Pluto midpoint structure in a 3-point picture with Zeus. This is one of the best planetary pictures for positive growth and development and the beginning of new creative directions in the financial and economic systems, but also the beginning of a deep shift in our values, resources, and relationships too. And all 4 of these planets are retrograde, which means there is a pulling back of the energy, a closer examination, a reevaluation at hand. So we have to say as well, what is all of this retrograde saying? This whole structure is retrograde. The Jupiter is asking us to broaden our visions in terms of what can be, to gain deeper insights into our worldview, and it's also about developing our inner calling. As we move to the Venus is asking what we value, our financial conditions, what's important, what our resources are, our goods, our capacities, our capabilities, and how we're using our innate, our essence. And so it's also affecting our relationships as well. Who are we hanging out with and spending our energy on? It's about looking below the apparent charms and assessing the real worth and value of something. So that's going to be a very interesting area. And the Zeus tells us about a reevaluation of new creative directions. So there are new trajectories, but it's the Pluto here that suggests this karmic and evolutionary culmination, that we're awakening to higher capacities and capabilities and possibilities that have been dormant or latent to this point. So we have this super positive structure that's also retrograde. And how I would interpret this is that we're casting off the old system and opening to the new. Individually and collectively, we are moving beyond the base chakra system of survival, and we're moving into the heart, mind, body as expression. And that is this shift of consciousness that is upon us. That is how the world is changing. And so all energy that is aligned with the old paradigm, the service to self, the every man for himself, the greed, the corruption, deception, misuse, and abuse of power will begin to experience this fall, this release. And those aligned with humanity, consciousness, compassion, and heart-centered giving and sharing through the use of one's innate capacities and capabilities, those will flourish, and they're going to begin to fly off in new directions and trajectories. And this is individual as it is collective. So this Jupiter, Pluto, Venus, and with Zeus is going to be a good development for everyone, and you're going to see the universe begin to offer up opportunities that come by way of universal gift. So this will bring in good financial situations or a fortunate turn of circumstances in your business or personal life, freed up time and energy, or the presentation of a new road. In terms of our financial and economic system, it would say that this is a very positive change and trajectory, and that there is not going to be a total collapse of our economy, but rather a selective collapse of those areas that are aligned with the old paradigm, and an expansion for those who are aligned with service to others and humanity. Making it more complex is that I think there are things that are going to be a bit hard to see with the Neptune Hades, because there's so much actual deception and confusion going on. Most of the world is in this cloud, and there's just so much ambiguity. And this structure is going to remain there through the election. So just a heads up as we head into the fall equinox, and I haven't taken a deep dive into this chart yet, but the Mars Admetos picture could definitely indicate a suppression in the markets, or more restrictions, or some kind of restriction of energy or obstacles. But it is in a 3-point picture with Jupiter. So that could tell us that there are some type of special operations going on here. Mars Admetos can indicate, blockage. It can also indicate special work. So, and perhaps these could be some special operations that are beneficial with Jupiter. It can also be an exacerbation of the issue of the nefarious operations as well. But I think, on the whole, these charts, and we really know the direction we're heading anyway. So I really like that. I really like that Jupiter. It could also be a time, when we think about special operations, when thousands of sealed indictments come to fruition with the Pluto. So this can be expansion, or it can be nefarious as well. And with the Neptune Hades, all of this is hidden from view. So what will this new financial economic system look like? In short, it's going to be a system that will free people up. We're moving into freedom and soul sovereignty, so you can have time to develop your souls and your innate, and you can begin living and loving life, every single person on the planet. So that system would basically wipe out all debt, where basic needs of living and health are provided for, and where there is free energy for everyone. And this system does exist. It's referred to as NESARA or GESARA, and I'll put a link in the description to a site that will tell you more about it, although it's all over now. And this is the National Economic Security and Referendum Act. N for national, G for global. And there are a couple points here that I wanted to go over so you can get a better idea of where we're headed. And these are, there are so many good points, but these are 4 points that really highlight this agreement. Point 1 is that there is an overall basic income. It gives a basic income to live and pay rent for everyone. So you don't have to worry about your basic survival needs. People can still work and go, but their money can be spent on their enjoyment rather than on survival. This act cancels all debt. So no student loans, no credit card, mortgage, bank debt, gone. Point 3, it abolishes income tax and the IRS and creates it's either a 14 or a 17% flat tax rate for all non-essentials. So things like food and medicine, all secondhand items, secondhand, older homes wouldn't be taxed. This last point is probably the thing that is going to change our world most. It's going to make our world so different in so many ways that it's exponential. It's infinite. And that is the release of some 6,000 patents of advanced technologies, advanced scientific technologies, government deep black programs, things that have been withheld from the people for a century. We've been living like dinosaurs. I kid you not. Doesn't it ever feel to you like, look at airplanes. Airplanes haven't changed one iota in 40 years. It's always seemed so strange to me. And so there are a few technologies here, like free energy and anti-gravity. They already have that technology, and it came from beyond. It's one of the deep black programs. Also, sonic healing. And this is what I think is going to, I don't know, they're all going to change the world, in infinite ways. But the sonic healing, they have the ability, they're actually referred to as med beds, and I'll try to find that link as well. There was a good link giving some information as to what those will look like. But they can literally regenerate they can regenerate organs, they can scan the body and figure out what's wrong and completely fix it. I mean, this is it's going to, and I think the president had just said a few weeks ago, hospitals will be abolished as we know it, because he knows that all of these patents are about to be released. And I'm not mentioning this agreement, this act rather, because I'm spouting some conspiracy theory. NESARA actually exists, and it's an act that Bill Clinton signed into law in 2000. And that, and this whole act, this is something that would truly be in line with this energetic of service to others that we're moving into, and this 3-point picture here as the Pluto returns to its natal place in the nation's chart is a strong signaling in that direction. I also wanted to say the reason why no one knows about it is that the Supreme Court put a gag order on it, forbidding any public officials or anyone who had knowledge of it who might give information about NESARA to the public. And then there were further tactics used by the deep state to hide NESARA. So there's been an incredible amount of trickery to keep NESARA from the knowledge of the people. But Trump has signaled in this direction, so it's a very interesting situation as to if it might unfold. And I'm just so excited about the potential of it because I see all of these incredible good financial aspects here. And Trump did signal at the end of March of this year when he absorbed the Federal Reserve into the U.S. Treasury, thereby taking the Fed out of the control of the cabal and deep state. So in terms of the charts, another interesting condition of the NESARA is that it requires the removal of all government officials that have been treasonous. And I would assume, although I'm not sure, that this has to happen before the declaration of NESARA. And so it's an interesting situation. I mean, we know that the DOJ has tens of thousands of sealed indictments, or that some of that, and some of that could happen now, but the fall equinox chart, and I'll put that up again, it just looks ripe for some serious excavation of corruption, as the Pluto makes a station exactly on the world axis, and it just sits there for 2 months. So this is indicating a powerful time of transmutation and restructuring. Pluto deals with collective shadow issues, and particularly those things in our culture that are hardest to look at and own. Whatever Pluto touches is often sworn to secrecy. So with the Venus-Jupiter, it can tell us about hidden wealth. And hidden wealth in the form of GESARA, who has these vast reserves of gold that would basically fund the world into the new paradigm. So it can be a wealth of buried matter or resources, like unconscious aspects of ourselves. And it can also be these advanced scientific technologies that have been hidden from the people for a century. It's not the technologies so much here that are hidden, but it is the betrayal of access to these technologies that we would have been a different world. So with Venus here, we can be looking at violations, intrusions, the experience of being taken by force. Venus brings us into this world of taboos, and together with Neptune Hades, it takes us further down into the world of secret societies and deception. So this is why you are seeing and will be seeing a lot more of, it's all going to come out. The human trafficking, the satanic abuse, the pedophilia. These are all structures that are deeply embedded within the dark faction, within the dark system. And they're already starting to expose now, but it's just going to become more intense on into the fall, as, so much of this darkness is going to come to light. And the same deep transformation and expansion in our resources flows over into our relationships and connections. So there's a coming together, and there are several structures in the chart that are indicating this coming together of aligned intention, one of love and compassion for the universe. We are learning to change and grow and evolve into new ways of being in relationship. So the first structure that is alerting us to this change is, of course, this Venus, Jupiter, Pluto with the Zeus. So it tells us that connections and relationships are now being sought that are deep, expansive, and which grow and can be enriched. And there is a drive to make the necessary changes. And then as we move on to the node Capito Poseidon in this 3-point picture, again, it tells us about this coming together of partnerships, groups, communities of like minds and shared truths. And both the Capito and Poseidon are retrograde here too, suggesting that there's an attunement in this area as well. And then we have the Sun-Moon midpoint structure. Now, the Sun-Moon midpoint structure is one of the most important midpoint structures, as it tells us about our relationships, and it tells us about the flow of information between the unconscious and the conscious. So here we're getting a similar picture. The Venus Zeus with the Poseidon, with the North Node conjunction to the Sun Moon. Everything's on the main artery here again. And it's telling us the desire to join with others in a creation of new bonds that are based in truth and integrity with that Poseidon. And then what you also have on this structure is Pluto and Mitos. Now, Pluto and Mitos is very different. It's a very deeply transformative midpoint structures, and it also can tell us about really difficult transformations. It's both telling us about a persistence and steadfastness to get to the truth here, get to the root of the matter. It's also telling us about deeply enduring connections that are beginning to form of heart-centered, aligned view and intention with that Venus-Zeus-Poseidon. So because we have to look at this in multidimensional ways, Pluto and Mitos can also tell us about a lot of resistance. They could tell us about a lot of distancing around not wanting to see or deal with change. It could tell us about increasing limitations. So we're really starting to get this picture here collectively of what is going on. And herein lies this great divide, what I call a great divide, between those who are aware of this dark faction, this subterranean level of evil, and those who aren't. And this is what this election is going to be about. It's not going to be about left or right. It has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. It has to do with good versus evil. And this election is simply going to be about those who are aware and those who aren't. And what this Venus-Pluto or this Sun-Moon Pluto and Mitos structure is also telling us is that it's bringing up these issues of personal power, and that there's a need here to release this collective shadow of codependency. Because when we look outside ourselves for others to meet our emotional stability needs, there's always a potential of an imbalance of power. So if we've taken for granted that the government or even the media has our best interests at heart, we hand over our power in the name of security and stability, and we end up in a relationship between a controller and a controllee. And it is these kinds of controls or forced limitations that promote stagnation. And when you have stagnation, eventually a structure like that is going to collapse, and that is what we are on the way to. And so this is what's going to slowly unfold. As we move through the summer into the fall, there's going to be this persistent unveiling and disclosure of the truth, and people are going to have to bring in their critical thinking. That's the Mercury, Saturn, Vulcanus on the side of the chart. and they're going to have to decide for themselves what is truth. Now, this is running alongside the psyops of deception with the Neptune Hades in the chart being waged by the dark faction and the mainstream media to control the narrative. So with the Pluto in Mitos, it's not only telling us about the many who are awakening and those who are resistant to change or who are not aware, but with that part of the collective that are unaware, and with the Neptune Hades Chiron, this is a very primal, primitive energy. And so as the shadow of the corruption reveals, people are going to have to deal with their own primitive primal issues around survival and wrap their heads around the world as they know it is not as it seems. And so likewise, the way that this whole structure can also work is that for every single person who's awake or has just awoken, and with the Neptune Hades Chiron, because this aspect has an incredible healing potential and energy. It's very humanitarian. And with the Chiron, it is the wounded healer. So we are using our own integration of what we know to help others, and so that is how we help our fellow human family, by sitting in compassion and allowance for those who are unaware, and to also use the discernment to illuminate the truth, but not to shame. So many of the unions, the communities, the organizations that'll be forming, and we could see this with the node Capito Poseidon 3-point picture, are forming for the purposes of anchoring and shining the light of truth for our human family. So the process of the universe, this disclosure of truth, this whole transmutation and release from the old matrix is of divine timing. It's already in the charts. So there's no need to convince others of the truth, because the universe does this. And all we need to do is be present with open arms and say, welcome to the new earth. So yes, with all of these structures, we're beginning to realize the use of our personal power to set the tide, but also the use of our innate to anchor the light. And this is what's pulling us into this new paradigm of deeper connections and alignment. Okay, so I want to move on to this Neptune Hades Chiron in this tight 3-point picture with Uranus Apollon. This is like a sci-fi movie, this structure. And there's so many fascinating potentials here. The Neptune Hades, and I want to start there. With the Neptune Hades, we begin to see the dissolution of the dark system. Neptune Hades is a very primal, very primitive energy, and it can have an anger attachment with it too. So I think we're starting to see this situation where the dark faction is getting desperate, they're getting sloppy, they're getting angry. And so what the Neptune Hades is incredible deception. Everything that is hidden and corrupt starts to come to the surface. And that's really on all levels. I'm not speaking just of what one entity. One entity is simply the collective unconscious's mirror, or the collective's mirror, rather. But I'm talking about also individually as well. So you'll see it in your personal stratosphere. And so we start to see the deception. we start to see the subversive or nefarious tactics. And what's beginning to happen is that they are getting into an infantile rage. And this structure is really there all the way up through the election. And in fact, in September, Pluto joins the world axis as well. So that again could be this real excavation of when we really begin to see what is underneath. But right now it's very confusing, especially if you're not aware of this whole subterranean level of evil that has been going on on our planet. So they're getting angry. They're throwing the whole damn pot of spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And that's what's starting now. And so these tactics, they have layers. There are a lot of different layers of deception. There are a lot of different layers of, artificial intelligence technologies that they can use for manipulation, and just a lot of psychological warfare. And their origins are hidden or concealed. And the Neptune Hades actually can mean infection. It can mean infection. It can mean epidemics. But then you say, okay, is it really an infection and epidemic, or is the deception in and of itself the infection or epidemic? And I believe it is the latter. So yes, there could be potentials for more waves or even mutated viruses, things like that. And I'm not saying that the virus isn't real, but what I'm saying is through the deception, it's not what they're saying it is. And that is the psychological warfare. And that's the thing that's going to continue on. That is the main thing. And the Neptune Hades can also deal with water and or air. So there are many different potentials here. There's definitely the potential for deception through perhaps nefarious tactics like toxic water or polluted water or air, something having to do with that. It can just be organic or an act of nature. Certainly this dust cloud from the Sahara that's consuming the world is of interest. Is there something about that that's nefarious, or is it simply what nature is doing? So this also brings into question, and I'll put this up on the screen because I'm not going to say it, chemtrails, EMFs, energetic warfare. All of those are potentials that, we'll see. There's also, there's also the potential for telluric events, especially with Pluto on the world axis again, back in, coming in the fall, or any water events like tidal waves, hurricanes. These are all Neptune Hades type of energies. So as we move forward, things are going to heat up, but the dark faction is also going to have less and less strength because there are way too many people awakened at this point. There are too many boots on the ground, calling out, calling truth, and that is actually the other side of Neptune Hades. And so with any midpoint structure, it's simply not one-dimensional. It is multidimensional, and we always have to look at it from that sort of holographic picture. So just as the Neptune Hades can indicate deception, ambiguities, and scarcity, it's also telling us about a helping hand. Neptune Hades can indicate great humanitarian energy, working with people who are in need, and also working with all kinds of base issues. So Neptune Hades is often found in the charts of humanitarians and doctors and therapists, and certainly anyone who's in the healing modalities. But also the Hades deals with the antiquities and ancient civilizations. So with that Uranus Apollon in the 3-point picture, we can think of galactic civilizations here, as in ETs, help from beyond. And we already know that that's happening, and that there's a lot of activity, and we'll get to that in a minute. But what I'm trying to say is that with these benevolent energies, that this energetic is actually what is the countermeasure neutralizer to the Neptune Hades. And so something will happen and their nefarious tactic will be seen and it'll be called out by the digital warriors or with the virus. Some of the lies will emerge, or there'll be some type of alternative healing or cure, or there might be a small revolt somewhere that's quelled peacefully. Things like that will continue. It's more the psychological warfare that is, and that existential fear that is the hardest thing. But these nefarious tactics do need to play out long enough where the people begin to see the anomalies. Also here, the wounded healer Chiron in Aries holds tight to this structure, and this indicates that we're integrating many generations of being denied or blocked from being able to actualize our innate to the fullest possible extent. And so this structure deals with the clearing of fears and anxieties, particularly Chiron in Aries when it comes to willpower and choice. And so I think what also this Neptune, Chiron, Hades, also with the Uranus Apollon, because the Uranus Apollon would make it very expansive and widespread. So I think this represents a situation of how many, many people are awakening now and having to face the vastness of how everything they thought they knew about the world is not the way it is. And people are very attuned right now. If we go to the structure of the moon, we find this entire structure around this really tight Mars-Moon square. And it involves Sun Aries and, Sun Neptune and Aries Neptune, as well as Uranus is a little off, but I'm still taking it, considering that energy. But what this whole structure brings in and tells us about is there's an awakening, there are deeper sensitivities, there's an awakening to subtle forces, a lot of intuition. It's very strong. Also, a lot of emotional reactions. Very strong, very sharp. And so this can tell us about inspired humanitarian actions, as much as it can tell us about widespread confusion and delusion in the collective, because people are really waking up. And if we shift and also actually if we shift the dial a little bit to that node Neptune with the moon, it brings in the moon Uranus midpoint structure. So people are beginning to feel the imposition of the restraints, and they're also more attuned to what's going on, which makes the tension even greater. What this can also represent are revolts that might pop up, which are either small in size or put out by the admitos. But going back to the main chart, what really captured my intrigue is this 3-point picture with the Uranus Apollon. Now, Uranus Apollon is sudden expansion. It's very detached, very independent, broadens on the mental realm, and it's very into the technical sciences. So together with the Neptune Hades, what we're looking at, on the one hand, it's telling us about this back and forth between collective tension and relaxation. Collective tension because there's so much uncertainty and ambiguity, and this aspect could certainly also broaden, and there could be an expansion of the infection, making it more widespread. And then you have to ask yourself, or has the narrative around the virus been hijacked by the dark faction and being used for manipulation and control? Or are there other things going on? Because this is an aspect, this Neptune, Hades, Uranus, Apollon, for artificial intelligence, because that structure can bring in also hidden or futuristic technologies. It could bring in frontier sciences. Perhaps there's something that comes along that is alternative healing as it relates to the virus or something else. It can also bring in antiquities and ancient civilizations. So when you put together those 3 points, and I know that there's a lot of alien talk now, but if there was an alien structure, this would definitely be one of them, because you're dealing with a structure that has, potential for benevolent help from beyond, Neptune, from ancient civilizations of advanced technologies, Uranus Apollon, and Neptune and the Uranus Apollon would have to do with unseen forces up in the air. So this is largely going to be a war of artificial intelligence through cyberspace, through the mainstream media and psychological warfare. And there are going to be a lot of technologies used. Some we're aware of, some we're not. We could find out about technologies that have been used and perhaps their harm to humanity, like chemtrails and electromagnetic fields and energetic warfare. There's so many things here. The fact that they can control the weather. There's also something else I heard recently. I think it was an interview with Assange, but he was talking about this intelligent evil dust, which are microscopic particles that are electric circuits that they can put in paint or food or whatever, but they get embedded in your body and that they're able to, send signals or send information. And they could even spray that from chemtrails as well, because Uranus Apollon deals with things up in the air. So there are many nefarious technologies that we may or may not find, well, we'll eventually find out about them all. But there are also many technologies that have been suppressed from humanity and that will rock and change our world. And those are going to start to come out between now and the Pluto return. If whether NESARA or GESARA is passed now or in the near future, one of the stipulations of that referendum is that the government's deep black programs are released, and that would make the need for all energy platforms, fossil fuels, nuclear power, public utilities, obsolete. Sonic healing, and I know I mentioned this before, that's going to completely change our lives. Anti-gravity. And this is an interesting one because they have the technology, and that's where the whole alien thing comes in. This could get very interesting when you think about it, because this whole configuration can tell us on one hand about contact with galactic civilizations, benevolent contact. And there are already people now who are using Dr. Stephen Greer's CE5 protocol to make contact. And it's actually an app you can get for your phone. And I just got it the other day. It's fascinating, and I'm definitely going to try it. So this configuration can be seen as beneficial contacts with other realms, but it can also be deceptive. And within the government's black box programs, there is this anti-gravity technology, and they have produced what's called an ARV, an alien reproduction vehicle. And this vehicle was unveiled in the 80s. It can hover, it can shoot out to the side, 12 miles, it can go 12 miles with under a second and a half. And that was never revealed. And one of the reasons why it was never revealed was because it was a tool for psychological warfare. So if you have a chance, watch this movie, Unacknowledged. It's on Netflix. It's all about this. It's absolutely fascinating. And Dr. Stephen Greer. But he states in the movie that this vehicle was to be their final asset and tool for psychological warfare, because these vehicles were technologically identical to the UFOs that they dismantled. You can't tell them apart. So, like many false flags played before, the disclosure of a possible hostile alien invasion would create a lot of collective shock. I'm not sure if it should even be a concern, really, because it's hard to know where the power is anymore. Does Trump control the military-industrial complex fully? Or is there still a lot of infiltration by the deep state, and how much control do they have? Because they're connected with all of the manufacturers. So at the very least, this is going to be a disclosure of the deception, and also it'll disclose the technology. But there are a lot of beneficial reforms also that can be made with this structure. The Uranus Apollon can indicate extensive reforms, and with Hades, even medical reforms to help people in need. So there you have it, your summer solstice solar eclipse 2020. This is going to be a great year, guys. Get out in nature, connect with your homies. We are crossing the Delaware and we are almost there. It's just so important that we sit in allowance with love and compassion for those who are unaware, because we are not a dualistic, divided world anymore. We are one consciousness, and everyone here is on the same ride, and we're going to the same place together. So, peace.